Project for today is going to be this Gravely Zero Turn. It's a ZT60 HD. These are usually pretty good mowers. They're built pretty heavy. They got the Kawasaki engine. And he said he was mowing with it and he heard a kind of a noise, and then he had a bunch of white smoke coming out of it, and I did some checking, see if he had any compression on each side, and the one side didn't have hardly any compression, and I couldn't even hardly get the spark plug out, and this is what I found. So something let loose and the piston slammed into the valves and the spark plug. I could barely get that out of there because it was mushroomed over so bad. But you can see down inside there, I don't know if I can get that there's a mouse nest in there. So this side overheated, and it must have seized up or dropped the valve or something and just beat the crap out of the piston. I guess you can't really see in there, but we'll do a teardown video on this one. We'll see what actually went wrong, caused it to fail. But I've got another mower with a bad transmission, so we're going to swap the engine out of that one and put it into here. But we'll get this engine pulled off of here first and go from there. I'll get you set up and we'll get started. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is get these fuel lines off of here. I have to get the fuel lines off that fuel pump. I'm just going to take this fuel pump right off. If I can get a screwdriver in there, I can get the top one. This line out of here. I'll disconnect that battery before I end up shocking myself on something. If you don't have one of these little tiny screwdrivers, I recommend getting one. I got this at a swap meet and I've actually used it a ton more than I thought I would. Especially for little stuff like this. You're not going to break anything loose with it that's too tight. You get that off of there. I'm sure there's some electrical stuff we need to get off, and I'm thinking, wonder if I can get the motor pulled up a little bit and move it back because it's hard to get at any of that stuff down by the starter or anything. I'll pull that bracket off first. Anything to give us a little extra room. These things are packed in here so tight. Do these ones down in here first. Maybe that gave us a little more room. I'll get something to get those throttle and choke cable off of there. I'll get that bracket off the starter there. A lot of times when I'm doing a bigger project like this, if you're going to be taking a lot of bolts out, if you can, just put the bolts back loosely where they're at. That way, you go to put it back together, you don't have a pile of bolts that you don't know where they go. Makes it a lot easier for reassembly. I think we'll go underneath now and get the pulleys off of it, and then see if the motor mount bolts. I don't know if they have nuts going up on top or if it's just the unthreaded down below would be nicer. That's what it looks like they are. One thing with these clutches, make sure if you can to follow the wires up and unplug them before you zip that bolt out. So a few times I've tried to zip that bolt out and it starts to fall and they're heavy, so you're dealing with that. Plus trying to get the wire disconnected so you don't rip the wires off. I was gonna get this belt off of here. See if I can release the tension. This one's got a square hole here on the belt tensioner to put a ratchet into and pull the belt tensioner back to loosen it. And do that, try to get the belt off. That off of there. And that comes off. And we'll have to get them wires disconnected for the clutch. Those come up here. And there's a plug right there. I'll have to get a screwdriver to get in the little clip to get that off of there. And I got that wire unclipped. It's just a little 2-wire plug, and the female end is up off of the wiring harness. That has a little tab that goes over. I think it can be a little bit tough to get yanked out of there. I couldn't really get the camera in there to show you. And we'll see. I think that's zip tied up there, the wire. So I'll have to cut that zip tie and then we can pull that clutch off of there. That thing is tight. A lot of these crank bolts, if they have never been taken off, they'll have Loctite on them from the factory. So make them a little more difficult to pull off. I'll have to see if I can get the air impact in here to get that off. You can't really, normally I would just heat it some to melt the Loctite, but you can't really do that with this clutch on here. I got the air impact. This should take it off of there. Oop. The clutch come off. Well, a lot of times these clutches will be stuck on there. This one looks like it had a little bit of grease in there or something. It's a good idea to put some anti-seize in those when you put them back together. Otherwise you can end up wrecking the clutch trying to get them off. And then also there's like usually a little bracket or something that goes through one of these holes to keep it from spinning. So you go to put it back up on there, make sure it's in the bracket so it can't spin. Otherwise the second you turn it on, or even sometimes just starting it, they'll whip around and it'll rip all the wires off of it and wreck it that way too. Now the belt tensioner for the drive belt for the transmission, that one, you go through this hole right here, and there's a spring back there. You can put a spring puller tool through there and pull that spring off of there. I use a spring puller tool like this. That seems to work the best for a lot of these hard to get to springs. I got you set up underneath the mower here. Let's see if you can see. I'll grab that spring and loosen up that belt. There we go. And the engine pulley fell right off of there. We got that piece now too. There is a washer between the two, so that's something to watch for. So now, be looking for the motor mount bolts. Got one here, one here, and a couple back here. I'll zip those out of there and see if there's anything else connected to the motor we gotta take off. There's probably I'm thinking there's a ground wire. Usually there is one somewhere, but we'll figure it out when we start lifting it off of there. I can't get to that one. That one bracket came with that one. Yeah, I got 3 out of the 4. I'll have to grab a shorter socket and a ratchet for that one. Alright, we got the bolts out of it, so let's see if we can lift it off of there. It's pretty heavy, so probably that could be the easiest thing to lift up and out of there. Oh, I knew I had something I'd forget. I forgot that starter wire. Got one down in here. I've got to pull that off. I think that's the only one I saw. Alright, let's try this again. I got the starter wire off of it now. It looks like we have a ground wire, and this oil drain tube has to come up. There's a ground wire down in here, which you would have never been able to get that without pulling the motor backwards first. I mean, you probably could have, it just would have been a pain. Alright, now we should have everything off of it. Oh, one more wiring harness. And it's out of there. We'll have to clean up all this stuff in here. Looks like it'd been leaking oil and building up with grass and stuff. This is when it gets kind of dangerous. That's all around your electrical. You can start a fire. You can see all the little nooks and crannies got mouse nests coming out of it. So that was our issue that caused the meltdown. But if he doesn't want this motor back, he might end up wanting to take it, but if he doesn't, we'll do a teardown video on it and see all the damage and carnage inside. This is the donor machine. It's not a real bad mower, but the transmission is bad and the front end is kind of all wore out. So you can see that one tire facing off to the side compared to that one. It needs a lot of money put into it, and it's not really worth it. But it has the good Kawasaki 26 horsepower motor. But I'll fire it up and I'll show you the noises it makes when we try to go in reverse. So what's happening is, I don't remember where you can, here's this one actually has a dipstick you could check the oil on the rear end, but you can see the shaft down inside there and it's broke or it's missing a bearing or something, so it's laid down in the transmission wrong. So as you're going forward, it lifts the shaft up and it works fine, then you go back and it sucks the shaft down, and then it puts a lot of strain on the pump. You can hear the pump bypassing in there because it's got so much strain on it. So I'll probably just kind of speed through me taking this motor off of here. You don't need to see me pull two different motors. But this one should be almost an exact swap back to what we have. It's still got, I was looking to see if it had the bolt hole for the ground wires that one had, and then it's got the same plug-in on the wiring harness. And we should be pretty good direct swap. So we ran into a bit of a snag here. The crankshaft on the donor engine is too long, and it's an 1 1/8" shaft, and this one is a 1" shaft. So what I could do is use the pulleys off of the Dixon that I pulled it out of, because the PTO clutch is the same, pretty close anyway, and then this drive pulley is the same size around. But I could cut this spacer shorter so it sucks it up closer, but the PTO clutch won't go any farther than what it is now. So I might end up having to actually cut the crankshaft. So I'll throw just this on to show you. It's kind of difficult to do with one hand. I can get it up a little bit farther than what it was with the pulley on there, but then if we measure to the bottom, we're at about 6 inches, and on this one we're only at about 4 3/4. And this PTO clutch does stick out farther, so if I could find another one that was sucked up tight like this one, that might get us our difference. Well, it wouldn't quite, because that's only like 3/4 of an inch. It'd still be pretty close though. So that might be another option, is to find a different clutch. But I'll bring you back when I figure something out here. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm going to see if I can swap that pulley, because this is one is actually taller between here. And then I'm going to try to pull this pulley off and then swap it with the other one. So I just put a bolt and a washer here so I could press on the center shaft, Then this bearing ends up pushing the shaft off that bearing with the puller set up like that. I'm just worried I'm gonna bend the pulley, but it doesn't seem to be so far. It seemed like it started to move a little bit, so I'll keep working on that, see if I can get it apart. I got that one off of there, and I got it set up on this one. This one's a little bit more difficult because I have to take these nuts off a little at a time. I got 2 of them completely off, but I needed to be able to get under, and this one was tight to that. But this plate has to come with it because it has the plate down here where that doesn't come off of there. So we'll keep pulling on this one, see what happens. That one came off of there. I might need to tap that down a little bit. And that comes off like that. I still got that plate back here. So now I should be able to swap it to the other one. That one's got the bigger 1.1/8" shaft. This is all I had in there. Let's just make sure that we were pressing just on this instead of on that bearing. And now we're running into another issue. I think this plate is... Oh no, there it goes on there. You just gotta put the springs on. So now I'll just probably run a long bolt through here and suck all that together. So I did it, I just put another washer on here and I just used my actual puller, and I'll turn that and we'll suck that together. And we can see we're down all the way there. And then I'll have to put the nuts back on here. These, you don't want to just ram these down all the way. They're adjustable. So I kind of know where they were at when I started anyway, so. Just about a thread was poking up through, so that's what I'm gonna do again. And that spins good. Now you can see we're a lot shorter. It's back up to here, so we'll put that on there and see how close that got us. So that helped out a lot, but we're still at about 5.5 inches to the bottom of the pulley, and I can't get that on any farther. So I think we were 4 3/4 on the other one, so we're still 3/4 of an inch off. So I'll have to figure out something else here too. So I set the motor in here, and then I put the clutch up there, and actually our belt alignment does not look that bad. I was thinking it would be tipped downward quite a bit, but it's not. So I think we might be okay, because as the deck goes down, the belt's going to get lower anyway, so it'll still be flat, so it'll only be a little bit at an angle up that high. So I might just try that, but then I still have to cut down. I'll have to cut down this pulley, because we've got these spacers here that are too long. I need to basically make it more like that one. So this one had a spacer also like that, so we don't have to cut too much off of it. And then we can still keep the keyway. The key is in this pulley on the top here, so we'll keep that. And this pulley looks like it might be a little bit narrower. We'll have to see how that fits the belt. And then we'll go from there. We can see through the exhaust side here that the exhaust valve is just completely gone. That must have been what was hammering on the piston in there, and then was basically just an open hole for oil to pour out of the crankcase with the crankcase pressure, and then the rest of it was going over to this side through the breather and was burning. You can see how black that is in there too. So this will be an interesting one to tear down and see all the damage inside. I'm gonna swap the gas lines over now. I'm gonna put a new fuel filter on this. This one does not look the greatest. You'll notice on some of the clips that I'm gonna have to cut the audio. I forgot that I had the radio going, and YouTube doesn't like that if you have a radio going in your videos. These fuel filters, you always want to make sure you look for the arrow for the direction of flow. This one's going this way, so this is the one coming from the tank. I'll hook up the throttle and choke cable now. Just test to make sure which one's which. The top one is the choke. Or off choke there, you can see the little arm right here. It goes up to choke it. So I'm pushing it all the way back because we're off choke. We'll try it, make sure it goes all the way. That's all the way on choke. And we'll get the throttle. And that one's all the way at idle. Well, it looks like I'm going wide open. You can see there's a little stop here. That stop here makes it so you can actually adjust that to make it go around a little bit faster, a little bit slower. But I usually leave those alone. Those are factory set normally, so you don't really want to mess with that. But as long as you're touching right here, you're good to go. And then I think we're getting close to being able to fire it up. We got our gas lines hooked up, electrical is hooked up other than the battery. I don't have that hooked up yet. We'll have to zip tie a few things up. I have the wiring pulled up for the PTO clutch. That was one more thing I was going to show you. The plug-in was different because I had to swap that clutch from the other motor, and I just butt connected the old plug on there so I could still plug that in. So I'll have to plug that in, and then I think we'll be good to give it a try. Oh, I have this vent hose that runs over to the carburetor I have to put on still. I'll get all that stuff done and then we'll see if it fires up. Alright, we're going to try firing it up, make sure everything works. It's probably going to smoke pretty good when we first start it. That oil that's trapped in the exhaust. I let it run for about 10 minutes and it burned all that oil out of the exhaust and it quit smoking and it was running pretty good. And the deck worked and the drive worked and the belts didn't seem like they were getting hot or anything. So I think they're running straight enough. I gotta put that rear bumper back on and I think I'm gonna sharpen the blades. Yeah, they're okay, but he wanted me to sharpen them up if I could, so they don't look too bad. I'll put a fresh edge on those. Then we'll go out and do some test mowing with it and run it for a half hour so make sure it's fine. I did run this engine in the other mower for probably a half hour or so to make sure. It had like 275 hours on it, and this one, I'm not sure what this had on. It keeps flashing the oil change. Oh, 526 hours. So he didn't get too much life out of that motor. Usually these are good for over 1,000 hours, but when you get a mouse nest in there like that, it can wreck them pretty fast when they get overheated. So I'll bring you back when I get the rest of the stuff put together. Well, I got it all put back together. I changed the oil in it. Checked the air filter was fine, and I ended up putting new blades on it. The other ones, the back of the lift was worn pretty good, so I thought I'll just replace them. He wanted new blades anyway, so we're gonna fire it up and test it out a little bit here, and that'll do it for this one. Well, that's going to do it for this one. If you like this sort of thing, like the videos and subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.